As we approach these midterms, we're going to have this big midterm election. There's this one really, really pernicious development in our campaign system, one that's getting worse. And it's the role of unlimited super PAC money, particularly in these primary contests before the nomination set. Because so much of that money, I'd even hazard a majority of that super PAC money, is not used to make an argument about the candidate or issues, but rather to try to trick voters into believing the opposite of what a candidate says or believes. All right, so here's what I mean. Here's an example. In Michigan's 7th congressional district, swing district, right, Democrats are going to field a candidate. The Democratic nominee, he won on Tuesday night, a guy named Will Lawrence, was the subject of attack ads from a super PAC claiming that he is a Wall Street investor for owning a retirement account worth approximately $11,000. So the Crush MAGA PAC, that's a Democratic PAC, decided to launch a $532,000 ad campaign against Will Lawrence, who is the progressive candidate.
What do we really know about Will Lawrence? He says he'll stand up to corporate interests, but financial records show he's invested thousands in Wall Street, big oil, and data centers. He says he opposes dark money in politics, but he spent years running a dark money organization himself. And Will Lawrence claims to be a progressive, but he campaigned against Democrats and was part of a movement that helped Trump win Michigan. That's the real Will Lawrence. Crush MAGA PAC is responsible for the content of this advertising.
Okay, but here's the thing. That's totally and completely misleading, right? Will Lawrence was the progressive. He was the lefty. He was not a centrist candidate. He was the progressive. He's the co-founder of the Sunrise Movement, right? He was to the left of his party on many issues, including climate change. The people who paid for that ad think Lawrence is bad and want him to lose precisely because he is too far left and too progressive. They may even have really good faith worries that he would be a weak candidate in the general. And they could have run an ad making that case. But that is not what they did. No. What did they do? Instead, they spent money to make the opposite case, right? To try to trick voters. This guy says he's a progressive, but he has a $11,000 retirement account. And this isn't a one-off. This is like a pattern. We've seen it repeatedly throughout the primary season. In New York's 12th congressional district, there was a Democratic candidate named Alex Boris, and he became a target from pro-AI super PACs due to his past work in seeking to regulate advanced AI models, including this ad from the Think Big super PAC.
Meet Alex Boris. He's got a master's in computer science, but he's an expert in hypocrisy. He made hundreds of thousands of dollars building and selling the tech for ICE, enabling ICE, and powering their deportations while making bank. Now he's running from his past, while ICE is in our communities. But the facts don't lie, even if Alex does. ICE is powered by Boris's tech. Manhattan is smarter than that, and he should never, ever be in Congress. Think Big PAC is responsible for the content of this ad.
Right, so you heard it right there. This pro-AI PAC was trying to paint Boris negatively as a collaborator with ICE because of his time working at the tech firm Palantir. Except, Boris says he did not work with ICE while at Palantir, and that the company's ties to the agency contributed to his departure in 2009. But the bigger picture here, right, is that Boris was the pro-tech regulation candidate. He wanted to regulate AI. The big tech AI interests wanted to defeat him for that reason. But they did not run an ad saying, we shouldn't regulate AI. In fact, tech regulation will kill jobs. No. They tried to trick voters into thinking that Boris was actually a pro-ICE candidate, right? He was the candidate who was in bed with big tech rather than their foe. Then there was the Democratic primary in New Jersey's 11th congressional district, where Congressman Tom Malinowski, a generally pro-Israel Democrat and a kind of centrist, was targeted by the United Democracy Project, super PAC affiliated with AIPAC, after he spoke about conditioning U.S. aid to Israel. Again, instead of running ads about that, no, they accused Malinowski of voting to fund, quote, Trump's deportation force.
In the special election to fill Mikey Sherrill's House seat, Tom Malinowski says he'll stand up to Trump. But hold on. In 2019, Tom Malinowski voted with Trump and the Republicans to fund ICE. More than $200 million for Trump's deportation force. $200 million that got us this? Democrats called Malinowski's vote a blank check for the Trump administration and a betrayal. We can't trust Tom Malinowski. UDP is responsible for the content of this ad.
So that was a government funding bill he did vote for. But AIPAC didn't care one way or the other about ICE, right? That's not why they were opposing Tom Malinowski. They were opposing him because of his stance on Israel. And AIPAC went huge during this midterm cycle. I mean, New York Times analysis found that the pro-Israel lobbying group has more than doubled its spending on political campaigns, spending $67.2 million in 2026, much of it spent in Democratic primaries, while rarely mentioning Israel. I'll say that again. They are spending all this money, in some cases record-setting amounts in individual races, tens of millions, because they don't like Democratic candidates' stances on Israel. That's the issue they care about. But they're not talking about that. They never try to argue that the candidates' views on Israel are bad. Instead, they try to trick voters by waving around some other issue and saying they're pro-ICE. The Times also found that between April 2022 and the end of July this year, AIPAC funded 109 TV and digital ads in American elections. And now AIPAC is weighing a second effort to defeat Michigan Democratic Senate candidate Abdul al-Sayed after they already spent at least $32 million boosting Haley Stevens' campaign. And that brings us to the next big primary, which is on this Tuesday, which is, you'll be surprised to hear, also getting flooded with big PAC money. The Right Direction Wisconsin Super PAC, which is tied to the Republican Governors Association, has already spent $2.2 million in quote-unquote attack ads against the Democratic candidate in the governor's race, Francesca Hong. They are ostensibly criticizing her for being too liberal in what is very obviously a strategy to grow her appeal among Democratic primary voters. This has been a long-standing trick that people have used, right? A Wisconsin Democratic strategist told the New York Times, quote, "Every Democratic campaign for governor, including Hong's, should call this out for what it is, a sneaky, underhanded, blatant attempt to meddle in the democratic process." And this comes as Senator Bernie Sanders has declined to endorse Hong, though he's endorsed other progressives. Many Democrats in the state and nationally are worried that she may be an easier candidate to defeat against a Republican than her main opponent, David Crowley. That's especially true given that they're going up against a Republican candidate in Congressman Tom Tiffany, who voted to overturn the 2020 election. Again, none of this spending, and there's tens of millions of dollars of it, has to do with people actually going into the public sphere and making the arguments they actually believe in. Saying, hey, we should not regulate AI, or Israel's our closest ally, we should support them with weapons and aid. Or data centers are great and are going to create jobs. Let's build more. No. Instead, we have ended up with a completely perverse system in which all the money goes into not making those arguments, trying to trick people. It's disingenuous. It's insidious. It fundamentally insults voters.